This is Inside the FLX from FingerLakes1.com, our Tuesday morning live edition. I'm Ted Baker, and our regular monthly visitor is Chris Lajewski with the Montezuma Audubon Center, Route 89 in Savannah. Welcome back.
Good morning, Ted.
Just off some vacation, looking good with that Florida tan.
A little bit of R&R in beautiful Florida. Yeah.
So I like to remind people every once in a while the difference between the Montezuma Audubon Center, which you head up, and the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, two different organizations, but you work together on a lot of things.
That's right, and Montezuma Audubon Center has been leading environmental education programs and bird conservation projects for now 15 years. And the Audubon Center is up on Route 89 in Savannah. We're actually a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation facility that is managed by the National Audubon Society, a nonprofit organization. And we work very closely with DEC as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to connect people to the broader 50,000-acre Montezuma Wetlands complex, which includes all the state land and the federal land at the refuge.
Let's talk a little bit about migratory waterfowl. I'm seeing a lot of them on the water. I go by the northern end of Seneca Lake on the way into work each day, and just thousands and thousands of geese and ducks and other birds, and starting to see some of them in the air.
That's right, and as the temperatures continue to warm and the southerly winds blow a little bit more frequently, we're going to see even more waterfowl moving into the Finger Lakes region and the Montezuma Wetlands complex. Right now, we are starting to see the first larger flocks of snow geese coming back into the Finger Lakes region. We had reports just last week of 5,000 to 10,000 snow geese in the area, primarily still using the agricultural fields because Montezuma's marshes remain frozen for the most part. Starting to see some more open waters right at the north ends of the Finger Lakes and in the deeper areas of the Finger Lakes. But as we continue to go into March, we're going to see even more waterfowl, more ducks, geese, and swans, probably about 3 dozen different species of those waterfowl stopping at Montezuma as they're going from their mid-Atlantic wintering grounds to their breeding grounds up in the Arctic tundra or the boreal forest of Canada. So they're stopping with us, they're resting, they're feeding, they're staying acquainted with their mate. At this point, they are paired up with a mate, and they will be breeding once they get up into the Canadian regions.
I think I'm getting to where I can tell the difference, even if I don't see the color, between a snow flock or a Canada goose flock. Am I right there? Is there a difference a little bit in silhouette that you can maybe tell, or am I just crazy?
Well, probably what you're going to notice is just a difference in the flock formation. Typically, the Canada geese are going to be in that traditional V formation. Now, they may stray a little bit from that, but generally it's a V formation. Sometimes it looks like a check mark in the sky with one side of the flock being a little bit longer than the other. And then the snow geese, they have a more loosely oriented flock. So I think of them as being more of a U shape, and they change very quickly through the sky. So sometimes it's a U and then to a V and then back to a U. But still, we're going to see thousands of these birds in the skies over the next month and a half using Montezuma's marshes as well as the Finger Lakes as they're migrating to their breeding grounds.
Any particular unusual sightings of late?
Well, just in the last couple weeks, we started to see some sandhill cranes moving back into the Finger Lakes region, not yet in the Montezuma Wetlands complex, but that's a sign that spring is knocking on the door. We continue to see northern harriers. They're a wintering raptor within the Montezuma Wetlands complex. Also still seeing some rough-legged hawks, which are, again, just within the Montezuma area during the winter months. They, too, will be going northward for the breeding season.
Chris Lajewski with us from the Montezuma Audubon Center, Route 89 in Savannah. Species Spotlight this week is on the eastern bluebird. Now, that's one that we can all help preserve because we all know about putting up those bluebird houses, and if you do it right, they'll get used.
That's right, and the eastern bluebird is, of course, the New York State bird, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight it this month. Starting to see more activity around our eastern bluebird boxes at Montezuma Audubon Center. They're starting to explore potential nesting sites as we get here into March now. Eastern bluebird is a fairly small songbird, about 5 inches or so in length, mostly blue overall. The male slightly deeper blue than the female, but both the male and female will have a rusty orange colored chest. And You're right. We can all do something for these bluebirds, and the reason for that is they use nesting boxes, or in some cases, natural cavities, which are holes in trees. Now, we're seeing many more of them these days because people have put up bluebird boxes in their backyards, in their communities. They typically inhabit open areas, countrysides, field-sides, roadsides, or even urban areas if there's a fairly substantial amount of open lawn space. They typically eat berries and insects. They're not going to really go for the black oil sunflower seed that you might put out in a feeder. But if you put out a bluebird box this time of year, they certainly could be utilized by those eastern bluebirds. Over the last century or so, the population of bluebirds has increased after generations of decline, primarily because of habitat loss. Trees were cut down, forests were cut down, so their nesting areas were destroyed. But as the state, New York State, has reforested, as people put out eastern bluebird boxes, we're starting to see more bluebirds in our communities.
If you think you have a good property for a bluebird box, what are some tips for putting them up and things to avoid and maintenance?
Well, maintenance is critical. This is the time of year to clean out those bluebird boxes. They may have been used by other birds during the winter months, not to nest, but simply just to survive the winter. They could also be used by small mammals during the winter months, squirrels or field mice, things like that. So clean those boxes out, give them a thorough cleaning and scrubbing, get them ready for the breeding season. I typically put my bluebird boxes in pairs, about 4 to 6 feet in height. And the reason for the pairs is that another species, such as a tree swallow or house wren or house sparrow, could use one box. And as long as they have one box, they will typically allow an eastern bluebird or another cavity nester like a woodpecker or a black-capped chickadee to nest in that other box that's nearby.
Any predation risk from, for example, squirrels? Do you need to put a squirrel baffle on your pole or anything like that?
Not typically, but I have seen some horrific scenes in bluebird boxes that has been caused by house sparrows. House sparrows are an invasive species that were introduced into this country back around the 1900 to control insects down in New York City. Well, people at that point didn't understand what a new species in this country could do. The threats, the disease, the pests, the pathogens that keep house sparrows in check in Europe and Asia are not here in significant numbers. So their population exploded, and they are pretty ferocious, and they do outcompete eastern bluebirds for habitats, and they will even kill eastern bluebirds in the box as well as in their territories.
You do a lot of programs both with school kids and with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and it's a good time to start thinking about booking those for the spring and summer.
That's right. We're really looking forward to the spring field trip season at Montezuma Audubon Center. It's one of our busiest times of year. Typically, we have about 1,000 school children from the entire Finger Lakes region come to the Audubon Center to learn about the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, the birds, the native vegetation, the entire ecosystem, and how it is all working together, and how people manage the Montezuma Wetlands Complex as well. Now, the great thing about Montezuma Audubon Center field trips is that they are free for just about every school in our Finger Lakes region, and that is in large part because of a grant through the New York State Parks Connect Kids to Parks program. This is a reimbursable grant program. So we have to charge a fee for our programs, but the school districts get reimbursed through the grant, and this grant will also cover the very expensive transportation costs that the school districts will incur. So a great program. It's free for the schools, and the children learn about Montezuma Wetlands Complex and hopefully get inspired to help us protect it. So if teachers are looking for more information, they can go to our website, montezuma.audubon.org. We have a list of the programs that we offer from K through 12 grades, and they're all age appropriate, curriculum-based, standard-based activities, typically outside, a very safe place for children to be. Great time to be outside in the spring season. They can also email us, montezuma@audubon.org, for more information.
You have all that great wetland area around, but right on your own property, you have a very nice visitor center, and very often you can look out the back window and see some interesting things. Didn't you have an eagle and a cell tower a couple of years back?
That's right. The cell tower right across the street from the Audubon Center was used by a pair of bald eagles, and we were seeing bald eagles, could be that same pair, up there during the winter months. The last couple of months here, we were thinking, well, maybe they will nest there again. Turns out they were just using that as a roosting site, a great place to assess their territory, look at the wetlands, look for potential food, fish primarily, because they are nesting once again back in the swamp behind Montezuma Audubon Center. But as we go through the next month to 2 months here during the heart of the migration season, we will be enjoying dozens of songbirds, all the waterfowl, and the birds of prey that migrate through Montezuma.
We had, I think, I didn't see as much last year, but 2 years ago, the spring migration, the warblers, in about a 2 or 3 day span in my backyard, there were easily a dozen different kinds. I mean, you don't have to travel far afield to see interesting sights.
That's right. Backyards, communities, parks. You're taking your dog for a walk, you're going to see probably and hear dozens of birds. At Montezuma Audubon Center, we have 2 miles of trails, forest, grassland, wetlands, and an open body of water, Crusoe Creek, which flows on the south side of the property. So with all those habitats, there's about 200 different bird species that are found at Montezuma Audubon Center over the course of the year. Those warblers, those vireos, and orioles will be coming back into the Finger Lakes region as we get into May and June. Many of them are going to stay with us and breed. Cerulean warbler, wood thrush, Baltimore oriole, and so many others will be coming back. Some will continue another 1,000 miles to the north to their breeding grounds. So great time of year to be out hiking or coming on one of our tours.
What internal trigger do the birds use to start migration? Is it just temperature? Could they be fooled if we had a warm stretch in January, or is there more to it than just the temp?
The southerly winds get the waterfowl to move. That certainly aids in their migration. They typically stay in place when there's a northerly wind. That northerly wind is going to make it very challenging for them to migrate. The length of daylight hours is really the main trigger for birds to migrate. So as we're now getting into the March season, the sun is staying up later into the day, it's rising earlier in the day. That is triggering the hormones inside birds to get them to move to their breeding grounds. But for the warblers and the vireos, those birds, again, triggered by daylight hours. They are down in Central and South America typically during the winter season. So they don't know what the weather is up here. They're just counting on that daylight hours to trigger the hormones to get them migrating northward.
You mentioned earlier the house sparrow being an invasive species. Upcoming virtual program on Friday, all about invasive species of the wetlands complex, both the plant and animal variety.
That's right. This Friday, March 4th at 6 p.m., we are hosting a virtual program during this National Invasive Species Awareness Week. This is a great opportunity for organizations all across the country to raise awareness about invasive species, the economic, environmental, and potentially harm to human health that these invasive plants, animals, pests, and pathogens can cause in our environment and potentially to people. So we're going to be highlighting the plants, the animals, and the insects that have become an invasive species within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, as well as the broader Finger Lakes region, and what we are doing about it. Invasive species can be managed if you find them soon enough, when the populations are small enough. The reason why they become an invasive species, as I mentioned earlier with the house sparrow, the pests, the pathogens that keep them in check in their native lands are not here. And so people primarily have brought and moved all these plants and animals and insects around the world now with our global trade and movement. And so we have a responsibility to manage them for the good of the larger ecosystem and our role in it. So a really fascinating look at invasive plant species coming up this Friday evening.
And of course, you have volunteers that go out and do things like pull up water chestnuts and manage that habitat. It's an active thing. I think some people think, well, in refuge lands, you just leave it alone. In a perfect world, maybe you could do that, but we're not in that world.
Invasive species are managed all across the Finger Lakes region, and we do that very well within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. We have an army of volunteers. About 200 different individuals come and help us remove species like bush honeysuckle, which is a common shrub in landscapes now. And while they do produce a berry, that berry is like junk food for our native birds. So it's like drinking Coke and eating pizza all day, every day. It may taste good, but it doesn't provide us with the valuable nutrients and minerals and vitamins that the birds need. And so we manage that. We manage the water chestnut, which can grow in wetlands and rivers and lakes. We're also surveying for hydrilla, which is in Cayuga Lake, but not in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex yet, so that's why we are out surveying. We want to make sure if it is there, we find it quickly and remove it rapidly. Early detection, a rapid response effort is a great way to keep invasive species from taking over an ecosystem.
Do you get any of the blue-green algae in the wetlands, or is that just in the lakes proper right now?
That does not take place within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex wetlands. It has popped up, obviously, in many of our Finger Lakes, unfortunately, but we don't have a problem with that.
Coming up on Thursday, March 10th, another virtual program at 6 o'clock, all about snow geese, and I love snow geese. I remember the first time in the Finger Lakes driving by a field that I thought was snow-covered and turned out was snow goose-covered, and about 5,000 of them lifted off.
Yeah, Thursday, March 10th, again, 6 p.m. in the evening, a virtual program highlighting the snow goose migration. The snow geese will be coming back into the area at that point. We're going to be offering a lot of in-person tours for people to experience this, but we want to prime people for this in-person experience through this virtual opportunity here on March 10th. So we're going to focus on the natural history of the snow goose, how to identify the snow goose. They do come in two different phases. There's the white morph and the blue morph. So we'll explain that difference and explain also how it's different from our Canada goose. And then we're going to, of course, highlight where people can go at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex to experience some flocks that number 250,000. Last winter we had about 400,000 right off from the Cayuga Lake State Park, right on Cayuga Lake. So it's an amazing sight. I'll never forget one of my unique experiences with the snow geese. I was leading a tour, this was about 6 or 7 years ago, and we came across this flock of about 250,000 on one of the National Wildlife Refuge's marshes, and a bald eagle came soaring right over this flock that was sitting on the marsh. And well, that flock of snow geese came up and started swirling around. It looked like a snow NATO, I called it, and people thought that was just the best thing, much better than National Geographic.
Wow.
It's something about seeing it live and in person. So we'll be offering those in-person opportunities, but a virtual experience to kick things off.
On Saturday, March 12th, 10 a.m., you celebrate the women of conservation.
Yeah, women have played such a vital role in conservation efforts here in this country, and so we're going to be highlighting that through another virtual program coming up here, and very appropriate here in the Finger Lakes region and Seneca Falls in particular. So we'll be doing that and highlighting so many women throughout history that are impacting and improving conservation efforts, the habitats for birds, other wildlife, as well as for people.
For first-time birders and for not first-time birders like me, sometimes there's certain, species identifications, all the different sparrows and everything. You have one coming up on Friday, March 18th, to tell apart the different swans that we see in the Finger Lakes.
We have about 3 species of swans, typically. There are 2 that are native to North America, 1 that is not native. The not native is the mute swan, that again brought over by people back in the 1800s. They're a beautiful bird, but they're a bird out of place. And like our other native swans, they are large and white overall, but they have a bright orange bill, and that's how you differentiate the native from the non-native. And they are causing destruction. Those mute swans are damaging habitat for our native waterfowl, and they will also go after people. I've heard of reports of them attacking canoers and kayakers on Lake Ontario, some of the Finger Lakes, and other waterways in our region. We also have the tundra swan, which is only here during the winter season and the early spring migration season. And the trumpeter swan, which is pretty much here year-round now. It's a native bird here in North America, finding home within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. So we'll go into the details through this virtual program, how you can identify our 3 swan species.
Again, that'll be coming up on Friday, March 18th. And then we talked about the migration, a whole program about that on Wednesday, March 23rd. And the website illustration is a wood duck, which I have never seen in the wild. Where can I go see a wood duck?
Come up to the Montezuma Audubon Center.
All right.
I'll take you to them. We've got this little swamp habitat on one of our trails that just is the magnet for wood ducks. The reason for that is there are a lot of standing dead trees that have been carved out by woodpeckers, so they produce quite a few cavities, holes in those trees. Wood ducks nest in holes in trees. They will also use wood duck boxes, much larger than the eastern bluebird box with the larger opening. So we will be seeing those gorgeous males, those brightly colored males. There's more of a grayish drab female of the wood duck species. She's got a unique white eye ring, almost like a teardrop over her eye. And we'll be seeing so many wood ducks here as we get into the March season.
We had a little bit of snow this winter, so you could break out the snowshoes, and I'm looking pretty good success. You've had about 15 or so sold-out snowshoe tours.
We did very well. Every Saturday in January and February, we had full capacity snowshoeing activities. We still have a decent amount of snow up at Montezuma Audubon Center in Savannah. Folks are looking to get out for one more excursion. There's about 8 inches of snow on the ground still, and we are still renting snowshoes for anyone who wants to come out. $5 an adult, $3 a child, $15 for the whole family. And you can take that out all day if you want. We're open 10 to 4 Tuesday through Saturday. But we are probably going to be transitioning out of the snowshoeing activities here. Probably more people coming out for our birding tours. The van tours will be very popular once again. We'll be having people follow our van in their own vehicles as we have been during the winter season. They'll be joining us for about 3 or 4 birding stops where we'll all get out of vehicles and bird together, enjoy the 36 species of waterfowl. As we get deeper into April and May, all the songbirds will be coming back into the area as well. So great opportunity still for people and families to enjoy Montezuma Wetlands Complex, the birds and other wildlife that are there.
I remember the van tour we did as a family a few years ago. It was just terrific. You meet all these people. It's a little bit different when you're following in the car, but there's still that kind of sense of community there. ny.audubon.org. There's one of those coming up the 5th, 9th, 12th, 17th, 19th, 26th. There's a whole bunch of those. And you get the audio program, and you still get the expert commentary, and you just never know what you're going to see. I mean, the one that we went on, we saw a few of the sandhill cranes for the first time ever for me, and we saw a whole bunch of predators out on a partially frozen marsh, and it's different every time.
Exactly. The habitat's always changing. The bird migration brings in new birds every day. So you never see the same thing twice, which is really what makes these programs unique. People come for multiple birding tours with us. They come seasonally, maybe. Some people just come for 1 or 2 tours. They want to get a sense for what this Montezuma Wetlands Complex is all about, how it's managed, and where they can go on their own to experience this. So these opportunities will bring people to areas of the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, the New York State DEC areas up in Savannah as well. Now, I do want to mention also, Ted, that the National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center and Wildlife Drive remain closed. The Visitor Center down there on routes 5 and 20 in Seneca Falls, that will be opening up in the middle of March, and the Wildlife Drive typically opens on April 1st, weather permitting, of course. But that still means that there are other areas, so many other areas that people can go and explore to see all these wonderful birds as they're migrating through.
So I always like to ask one last thing, any news with the Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps?
Well, we're planning our Onondaga Lake photography exhibit for the end of March. We're keying in on March 26th. That's the last Saturday of the month. I've got 16 photographers who have submitted amazing images of songbirds, the waterfowl, and the birds of prey, primarily the bald eagles that have been down at Onondaga Lake. So we're going to be finalizing the details of that, getting that up on our website, ny.audubon.org/OLCC. We're going to be doing an in-person event, thankfully, this year, getting back to in-person photography exhibit over at our Onondaga Lake Visitor Center in Syracuse.
All right, Chris, good to see you as always. Looking forward to getting the kayak out in maybe a few weeks or a couple of months, whatever the case might be, but good to talk with you as always.
It's always a pleasure, Ted. Thank you.
All right, Chris Lajewski with the Montezuma Audubon Center, Route 89 in Savannah. Inside the FLX is a live presentation at fingerlakes1.com. Nate Sharman is our producer. We've got some more great podcasts coming up this week, so be looking for those, and thanks for watching.